All right. We're recording.
All right. Welcome to this week's episode of RDU Buzz. As you can tell, this format is a little bit different than we have been doing over the last year. My due date is tomorrow, so we are trying to pre-record today, and this will kind of be our format just for the next few months with a newborn.
Or longer.
Yeah.
Or longer. Most likely
until we get it all figured out with taking care of the newborn. So this is going to be our format. So but it's still going to be, we're going to treat it exactly the same, kind of going over development in the area, restaurants, recreation, real estate, housing news, all the same stuff as normal. Obviously, you're not tuning in live to ask questions, but we would love for you to ask your questions in the comments as you're watching the pre-recorded show, and we promise we really will answer them.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the thought process is if y'all drop your questions below, if you have questions, what we'll do is we'll use those questions to kind of build out the next time we do a live, so to speak, or a pre-recorded live. So that's kind of the thought process so far. Drop your questions below. We'll answer those in the very next episode.
Yeah, or if there are questions about what we're, we'll also answer them in the comments.
Yeah,
there are general questions, but if you have like something you want us to talk about next time, we'll do it in the next one.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've got some local news to cover tonight. Actually, some pretty decent sized topics to talk about. And then we're going to wrap it up at the very end with a major update from the Federal Reserve, what they did this week, and kind of tie that into how we see that playing out in the local market. But the first article we're going to talk about is one that was put in the news this week by the News and Observer for Marbles Kids Museum. So if you don't know what Marbles Kids Museum is, it is an amazing museum that's downtown Raleigh. Obviously a kids museum. And I mean, we take our kids there not enough, to be honest. But when we do, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, they're always asking to go. It's just far enough from our house. It's like, oh, maybe not today or whatever. But it is a really fun museum, and there's really nothing to describe it in the area. It's definitely kind of unique. It's more of like a play museum. It's not like a science museum. So it's just a huge play space for kids with different types of exhibits, and it really is so imaginative and fun, and it's not that expensive to get in. It's the county kind of helps cover part of the cost of the museum, but it is a really wonderful place. So if you haven't been and you have kids, it's not gonna be fun as an adult. They actually do have adult nights.
They do, yeah.
Where they do like,
and they have an IMAX movie theater there too.
Yeah, an IMAX movie theater. But if you have kids and you haven't been, it's definitely a must do. Obviously, you can get pretty crowded on a Saturday, but it's worth it. It's really fun.
But the news is, and let me pull up the article so I can share it here. But the news is they are essentially adding some pretty significant square footage to the museum. So
over 5,000 square feet.
Yeah. Total over 5,000 square feet. So on the ground floor, they're going to be adding 2,600 square feet and a new exhibit space. Less fun, a new family restroom, and a nearby multi-purpose classroom. But it doesn't specify what the new exhibit is going to be. They probably don't know at this point.
Well, they're just calling it a disclosing it. Workforce of the future. It's an immersive city.
But I mean, 2,600 square feet expansion is not small. I mean, it's a pretty good size.
Yeah,
expansion.
It's going to be great. I think, obviously when you add space, you got to add another bathroom. That's just kind of part of it. So it's not glamorous, but it'll be needed and nice. And just having a new exhibit at the museum will be awesome.
Yeah. And on the second floor, they're also adding 2,600 square feet along with the new stairway and a rooftop courtyard for outdoor play and events. I guess what I'm unsure about is I'm assuming that this rooftop courtyard is not included in the 2,600 square feet.
Yeah, that's a little confusing in the way the article is written. If that would be, because that would obviously be outdoor space, and that this just says second floor. So I don't think that's included, but I mean, it could be. But it's going to be neat to have that little rooftop courtyard. I think that'll be really fun.
It is, and that's something
they're trying to think through, like event spaces for the future.
Yeah, and that's something Marbles. So Marbles is heavy on the indoor play space. Whereas you go to somewhere like the Life and Science Museum in Durham, it's heavy on the outdoor play space.
Yeah,
so
they're like totally opposite,
yeah,
like
so
they
Marbles
each have a little bit of both, but the Marbles outdoor space is really small right now.
Yeah, so Marbles adding additional outdoor play space will be really cool.
Yeah, and I don't the rendering it doesn't look like a huge, I think it's just kind of like more of a open play space. So it'll be interesting to see. It's not like an exhibit. So we'll see, maybe they'll put like, cornhole or something out there. I have no idea. But it'll be cool because I guess they're thinking more of like renting out the museum for events or things
which
like
they
that.
already do.
Yeah, and I think this will be more probably like to set up catering or, things along that nature. But we'll see what they do. But it is going to be really, really exciting. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And they're not wasting any time either. It's going to...
Construction starts next year and I think ends by 2026.
Yeah. So that's not bad to get 5,000 more square feet over, 2 years from today is not too bad. Because sometimes I feel like these types of projects are announced and it's just like so slow. And so to add all this will be, it doesn't really state if there'll be any closures to the museum. So hopefully it'll all be going on in the background and it won't impact like the hours or days that the museum is open, but that'll kind of be like something we find out along the way.
But in general, it's nice to see these upgrades. I mean, these are things that make this area really great for families, places like Marbles Kids Museum, places like the Life and Science Museum. So to see these places get renovated, expanded, improved it's a really cool thing.
Yeah, and it's needed and important. So
it is.
I think it's great.
It is. Cool. So speaking of places being renovated and improved, I know a couple weeks ago we talked about Red Hat Amphitheater and the possibility of it essentially moving from where it is to right next door. And that was just approved this week by the city of Raleigh. It was a unanimous vote. There was a little bit of controversy around it, just because, and you can see it on this map here. So South Street right here, you can kind of see the renderings of it. South Street is obviously going to have to close in this section.
Right.
Because that's where the amphitheater is going to go.
Yeah.
And a little bit of background to this. We have a whole another episode if you want to dig deeper into it. A little bit of background. They're moving it because they're expanding the convention center. And the expansion of the convention center is going to go where Red Hat Amphitheater is now. And Red Hat Amphitheater is basically sliding down just a little further. And it's still the general area. It's just essentially right next door. And it's going to require a street closure in order to pull that off. And so ultimately though, I mean, I think it was, it's the right decision. Like you got to keep the amphitheater. You can't,
yeah,
you can't let it go.
So sad to lose it. And it's really unique in a lot of ways. And like reading other people's opinions about it, obviously this is really going to impact the people that commute on South Street every day or live on South Street. I totally get that's going to be annoying to have to like go up a block and turn around. But that's kind of just downtown life in general. Like I feel like you're always having to make like obnoxious U-turns when you're like downtown and it's all one way. But in general, it would be really sad to see a music venue leave Raleigh, because it's a fun place to go and see a concert and it brings a lot of economic boom to downtown Raleigh because before a concert, people are going to go to a restaurant downtown, maybe one they could walk to, or maybe after a concert, go to a restaurant or a bar or something like that. And so having it downtown is really nice. And it's kind of nice. There is a parking deck right there, but I feel like having a music venue downtown is really unique compared to like going to PNC Arena to watch something or going to Walnut Creek.
Which is no longer called that, by the way. We'll get into that
next. Get into that in a minute. Going to other the larger music venues where it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here forever waiting to get out. But like you have so many more options for parking on that Red Hat or Ubering out. It's like, it's kind of nice.
Yeah. In the post-COVID world, and I don't have the data memorized as far as like foot traffic downtown. In the post-COVID world, downtowns have strughed.
Yeah, and it's not just downtown Raleigh.
To some degree, and downtown Raleigh hasn't been immune to that. With getting foot traffic back. So to lose something like Red Hat Amphitheater would be really bad for downtown.
Yeah.
And so there's a reason why it was a unanimous vote. It makes sense.
It makes
so
sense.
I'm happy for downtown Raleigh.
Right.
I think keeping the amphitheater is a really good thing. And like Cindy, all the stuff Cindy said about it being unique and just a really cool spot is all spot on. So anyway, again, we do have a more detailed video on that where we essentially devoted about half the live to the move and kind of the statistics behind the convention center and the amphitheater, and what the new one would look like. So feel free to go back and watch that. But Cindy brought up our next topic, which is PNC Arena. So there's a lot of changes going on with PNC Arena, and we've covered some of those as well. But a change that I don't know if anyone saw coming. They just saw the PNC sign come down, and it sparked some questions. But PNC Arena will now be called Lenovo Arena.
Yeah. So we get to have 10 years of being confused about that because
Lenovo Center.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
The Lenovo Center.
Yeah.
Yes. It'll take us forever to get used to calling it that. People are going to keep calling it PNC. I sometimes still call it the RBC Center, which is what it was called when I was a child. And so I'm like, it's been PNC for probably like 15 years. And I'm like, RBC. And so now I have to get used to Lenovo, but at least it's not 3 letters. So maybe it won't be as like jumbled up in my brain.
Yeah, so it was RBC Center from 2002 to 2012, and so I mean, you had a whole decade of calling it the RB. Yeah. I didn't grow up in the Raleigh-Durham area. I grew up in the Charlotte area,
which means you had the best arena. You had the Bojangles Coliseum.
No, but we did have where the Carolina Panthers play, which they're horrible this year, but it was called Ericsson Stadium. And now it's Bank of America Stadium. And I've just now gotten used to saying Bank of America Stadium because I grew up almost my entire childhood saying Ericsson Stadium.
It's probably going to change because Bank of America is not going to want their name on it anymore.
Yeah, why would you want your name on it? But anyway, back to Lenovo Center. So yeah, from 2002 to 2012, it was the RBC Center, and then it was named the PNC Arena. And now it's going to be the Lenovo Center. So it's going to take me a while
to remember, but it is really interesting. So not only we got a name change, and we have some like really big cosmetic changes and some extra spaces that are being built, and those renderings are available publicly to kind of look at. But they're doing some renovations on the inside, and then more so even on the outside with like a hotel, and I think they're trying to get more commercial space in there. So it'll be really cool to see what ends up happening with that once it's all done. But for now, at least we know it is Lenovo Center for
and the agreement. It looks like the agreement will be 10 years. The naming agreement, and it's worth $60 million. Wow,
very interesting.
So time to get used to the Lenovo.
They didn't ask if we wanted to name it the Honeycutt Arena. I would have given them like $60.
Ridiculous. Anyway, so those are our local stories, because I wanted to devote a decent amount of time on what the Federal Reserve just did. So several weeks ago, we talked about, I think it was Morgan Stanley that was projecting the Federal Reserve having a 50 basis point or 0.5% rate cut. And that was several weeks ago. And really the consensus was over the last several weeks since then was it would be a 25 basis point reduction. And the Fed came out and they dropped it by 0.5 point, by 50 basis points. So that is a significant drop. Now, how does this affect y'all? Because obviously we're not an economic podcast or anything like that. We focus more on the housing market. So how does this impact the housing market in the Raleigh area? And ultimately that's going to be about mortgage rates. So there were some articles that came out that I thought were a little misleading. I actually saw one today, and it said rates are the lowest they've been in 18 months or 2 years, something along those lines, after the Fed's cut. That's a little misleading because if you've tracked mortgage rates recently, you've noticed they've been coming down for a while.
Yeah,
and they haven't
last week to the lowest in 18 months, but that was before the
that was before the cut. And so mortgage rates have not come down all of a sudden. They've been coming down for a long time. And if you've been watching this, you've seen that. So mortgage rates have been low for a while, but they're down in anticipation of what the Fed is doing. And so the whole reason I'm bringing this up is just because the Fed lowered their rate by half a point
doesn't mean mortgage rates lowered half a point.
It's not, that's not going to result in a crumbling of mortgage rates, because we've really already seen them come down, and those are coming down in anticipation of what the Fed was going to do, which they were anticipating the Fed was going to drop rates. So all that to say, we do see much lower mortgage rates today than we did several months ago or earlier this year. And I'll pull up some graphs here in a second to show that. But we're not going to be in the 4s next week or anything like that because of what the Fed's doing. Yeah. So it's just not going to have that impact.
That same correlation. Yeah. It is confusing because you just hear rates are down. And so
and you think mortgage rates are, and they are, but they've been coming down for a while.
Yeah. So they all kind of have their own little shift there. So they haven't really changed since this Fed announcement this week. So
yeah. So pulling up a graph here. So this is Mortgage News Daily. And Mortgage News Daily tracks a whole bunch of different factors when pulling in mortgage rates. But you can see mortgage rates actually increased a tad bit today by 0.02%, which is hardly an increase. Yeah. It's just basically flat. But it does go to kind of prove my point that, these rates dropped yesterday. And so we're not seeing this crazy decline on the mortgage rate front. But if you look over here at the graph, you see, mortgage rates were in May 27 of this year, 7.27%. They're now 6.17%. You can see the decline over on this side. This happened gradually, but also pretty quickly over the last several months. And so all of this has come in anticipation for what the Fed was going to do, which is cut rates later this year. And they've started doing that. Yeah. Freddie Mac put out their graph. I thought this was going to be a graph here. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Nope, it's not. But anyway, here's the number. Freddie Mac, 6.09%. So again, there's multiple places you kind of pull in these rates. Freddie Mac's at just over 6%. So regardless of what number you're pulling in, these are really the lowest we've seen in about 2 years.
Yeah. So
it's pretty, it is
refreshing to see it really just be pretty much just 6. That's really nice compared to, there are times way over 7 and stuff. So this is refreshing. So we'll see what happens with the rest. I know next year a few different companies were reporting that, maybe we'll be at like 5.8 or 5.9 by the second quarter.
I think that's realistic at this point.
It could be realistic if we stay at 6 for the rest of this year or close to it. It's not unreasonable to think we could be at like 5.9, which isn't a huge difference from 6.09, but it does have that effect on your brain when you're in the 5s.
I do think though, but if the average right now, if the average is kicking out 6.1 or right around 6, if you've got good credit and a good debt to income ratio, you could get probably into the 5s
for sure
today.
Yeah. Or if you're doing, a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30, you're definitely in the 5s. You might could get into the 4s. So, there are definitely ways to get that down, or it might be worth it even to right now with our market, we have a lot of rising inventory. So it's not unreasonable to try to get a credit from a seller in today's market. And you could probably use some of that to do a discount point system.
Yeah. We've got a handful of contracts right now that asked up front for money from the seller for a rate buy down. And so there's a whole lot of creative ways around it, but I guess getting more into like the nitty gritty of this of how does this impact the market today. And I've said this before, and I'm going to stand by at least for now until we start seeing otherwise. But I really don't think we're going to see any movement from this in the market. I mean, we might see a little bit of uptick in buyer demand, and actually this month, like we personally have seen an increase in reach outs, an increase in interested buyers. But it is still a really funny market where you have nice homes that are sitting longer than they used to. You have buyers who are in a good way much more picky than they used to. They have the chance to see a house multiple times sometimes before they decide whether they want to put in an offer. So I don't see this year that market changing. I think for the rest of the year, we're going to be in a market that's very buyer friendly, and a market, if you're a seller, that's going to be really tough. If you're a seller, you're going to be dealing with buyers who are just more picky, buyers who are willing to cancel contracts a lot quicker. And you're going to probably just be dealing with less foot traffic into your home from a showing perspective. I just don't see this moving the needle this year. The good news is the Fed dropping the rate, in that article that I mentioned earlier, even though I feel like it was misleading, it's at least getting the news out. Mortgage rates are, when you look at them over the last couple of years, they're low compared. Like I know it's bizarre to say 6% is low, but it's we've been in seasons of mid sevens, upper
8.
sevens, 8, and we're back down closer
6 feels so much more reasonable.
It does. And so I think it's at least getting the news out to folks. Hey, mortgage rates are really low right now, no matter if their article was incorrect about why that occurred. It's something to know. I just don't think it's going to move the needle this year, but I think next year, I think we'll start to see some competition come back into the market. I think we'll start seeing the market move a little quicker.
I think it would move the needle more if people knew just how much money they were saving with it being 7.5 to 6. Because if you looked at 18 months ago, like if you bought the same exact priced house today, you're going to be saving almost $400 a month on your mortgage payment. So it's a considerable saving, if they truly
understood how much leverage they have. Like whether, no matter what the term is, whether it's, in North Carolina, we have a thing called due diligence. And right now we're able to get due diligence down really low. From the purchase price side, from the seller credit side, like there's so many ways to have leverage today that I just don't think is going to exist in March of next year.
Yeah, it may not. So we'll see what happens. But honestly, it feels like a pretty good time if you have to move anyway. If I like this is the best time it's been all year, and it might be the best time of all of next year, comparatively to what we'll see next year. So could be a really good time. So if you've been holding out because of mortgage rates, I would say, look, now is a great time to hop back in.
It is. And and this article here from nowbam.com, this is from the press conference with Jerome Powell in regards to the rate drop. And these are housing specific questions. He was asked by a couple of reporters. One, he was asked in regards to mortgage rates and what his anticipation is as far as mortgage rates next year. And he basically said, we don't speak on mortgage rates because it's not what they do. And he's right, obviously, about that. But it essentially, he essentially just put it back on the economy. He's like, where mortgage rates go will depend on how the economy looks. And for mortgage rates to get really low to where we saw them, years and years, I say years and years, it wasn't that long ago, 3 years ago? For them to get that low, like the economy would honestly have to look really bad. The job market, the job market would have to look really bad. The economic outlook would have to look really bad. And the indication is that's not where things are headed. And that's good in a lot of ways. And so I don't think anyone should be cheering for job loss just to have a little bit lower mortgage rate.
4.5%.
But you know, I think in general with where the economy looks to be going right now, I think, you know, projecting it into, you know, the upper fives next year is probably a best case scenario. And Jerome Powell was also asked about pricing, and we've covered this before in here, but his response was essentially, listen, the Fed, to fix housing pricing, that's a supply issue, and we have nothing to do with that as the Fed. And he's right. The supply issue is really up to local leaders, state leaders, federal leaders. I mean, all have a part to play in that. Probably local leaders more. But he's spot on with that. In order to get housing prices down, you really need to significantly increase the demand, which means typically build more.
Yeah. Decrease the demand.
Sorry. Increase the supply. I meant to increase the supply. Yeah, increase the supply. Yeah. Good catch.
Yeah.
Very good catch.
No problem. I'm always ready to correct you. That's what marriage is
I'm
for.
a lucky man. Yeah, but anyway, I thought it was great news that the Fed has started reducing rates. Great news that mortgage rates are the lowest they've been in years. Just all around, I think really good news. And I think it's going to set up hopefully a market. You know, I don't think no one wants a crazy competitive housing market. It's miserable. It's miserable unless you're a seller. And honestly, most sellers,
stressful as a seller too.
Most sellers are buyers, and so even for a seller, it's stressful. And you may get more for your house, but it's a stressful.
Just paying more for the next one.
Yeah, it's just a stressful process. And so I think hopefully what we see next year is just a good balanced market with healthy mortgage rates, healthy demand, healthy supply. I think that'd be great. So.
It's boring me to death.
It's 3 p.m. and you're yawning. You act like this is like our normal late evening live.
Listening to you talk, I guess. Just kidding.
Anyway, those are our topics for today. Like Cindy said earlier, obviously this is not live, but we're going to be releasing it at the same time that we normally do. If you have questions about what we're saying, obviously we'll answer those in the comments. If you have I guess we should say topics. If you have topics that you want us to cover in the next live that we do, just drop them down below, and then we'll loop those into our next pre-recorded. I don't even know what to call it anymore. I'm so used to calling it a live, but it's not live.
I mean, you and I are live. This is unedited.
Yeah, it's unedited.
We can call it raw video.
I'll just keep calling it live because it is that. It's unedited. So
yeah.
But anyway, appreciate y'all tuning in, and we'll see y'all next time we do this. All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.